Imagine the shock. Police tell Avery Carter, CA's groundbreaking youngest black female developer, she's trespassing on the luxury condo site she designed and built. Her factual claim, "I developed this," is met with raw, racist disbelief. "You expect me to believe a sister built this?" Cuffed on the land embodying her dreams, fueled by her slain brother's memory and battling constant sabotage. Her journey exposes a wealthy town's rotten, racist core. Witness her powerful, defiant stand against erasure. The August sun beat down on Crestview Heights, California, with the indifferent ferocity of a forge master. It baked the steel skeletons of the luxury condominiums rising against the bleached blue sky, turning the air into a shimmering, palpable thing. Avery Carter, sweat beading on her temples beneath the rim of her yellow hard hat, felt the heat seep into her bones, a familiar companion in these final stages of construction. At 32, she stood on ground she had conceptually terraformed, translating audacious dreams sketched on napkins into steel, glass, and sustainably sourced timber. She was, according to a grudging footnote in the LA Times, the youngest black female developer in California history to helm a project of this magnitude. The article had focused, predictably, on the projected property values, the Italian marble finishes, the panoramic ocean views, her identity a mere demographic curiosity tucked away like inconvenient wiring. Tonight, the cacophony of construction, the roar of loaders, the percussive symphony of nail guns, the shouts of the crew had faded. An uneasy twilight settled, painting the skeletal structures in hues of bruised purple and fading orange. Avery walked the site alone, a ritual she performed when doubt gnawed or inspiration flickered. Her boots crunched on the gravel path that would soon be landscaped into a drought-tolerant Zen garden. She ran her fingertips over a section of intricate metal latticework screening a private balcony, a design inspired by traditional Akan weaving patterns she'd fought tooth and nail to include against the architect's preference for something more universally appealing, which was code, she knew, for Eurocentric. This wasn't just a building. It was a statement, a quiet insistence on presence in a landscape designed to erase narratives like hers. A low growl intruded on the stillness. Headlights cut through the deepening dusk, pinning her against the rising structure like an insect on a board. A Crestview Police Department patrol car crawled to a stop beside her, its engine an ominous purr. The driver's side window slid down with a soft electronic whine. "Ma'am," a voice called out, gruff and edged with suspicion. A flashlight beam leaped from the car, blindingly bright, sweeping over her work clothes, her hard hat, settling on her face. Officer Jenkins, his name stitched above the pocket of his crisp uniform, leaned slightly out the window. His face was weathered, etched with the permanent skepticism of someone who spent his days expecting the worst. Avery shielded her eyes, blinking against the glare. A laugh escaped her, short and bitter, tasting like dust and exhaustion. "Evening, officer. Something I can help you with." "This is private property, ma'am," Jenkins stated, his tone leaving no room for ambiguity. "Construction sites closed for the day. You need to be moving along." The sheer, stunning absurdity of it hit her. After the years of battling zoning boards, charming investors, navigating microaggressions smoother than any bulldozer, after pouring her inheritance, her sanity, her brother's ghost into this patch of earth to be told to leave? "I'm aware it's private property," Officer Avery said, striving to keep her voice even, professional. The tremor starting in her hands betrayed her. "I own the development company. I drew the blueprints for this place." Jenkins exchanged a look with his partner, Officer O'Connor, a younger man with watchful eyes who was already reaching for the radio handset. The look was brief, but it spoke volumes, a shared language of dismissal Avery knew too well. "Dispatch, receiving a call. A possible trespasser at the Crestview Lux construction site." O'Connor's voice crackled, deliberately nonchalant. Female, mid-30s, black, claiming to be the developer. He elongated the word claiming, letting it hang in the air like a judgment. Claiming, as if her presence here, on this ground saturated with her ambition and grief, was an act of outrageous fiction. Fury, cold and sharp, pricked beneath Avery's forced calm. Her hands, slick with sweat now, fumbled for her phone in the pocket of her utility pants. "Claiming," she repeated, her voice rising despite herself. "Officer, this is my project. Ubuntu developments. She navigated quickly to the project's official website, the sleek interface a stark contrast to the gritty reality of the unfinished site. She held the phone towards the blinding flashlight beam, angling the screen. See? Crestview Lux. Developed by Ubuntu, the website featured glossy renderings, drone footage, and a Meet the Team section. Her official photo was there, the one the marketing team insisted on. It was artfully composed, focusing on her hands holding a scale model of the building complex, her face strategically cropped, blurred in the background. Emphasize the work, they'd said, not the identity. Make it palatable. Even in her own branding, she was partially obscured. That's my team, she said, her voice tight. My vision. Those latticework patterns you see? I argued for those for 6 months. Jenkins leaned closer, squinting at the small screen, the flashlight beam reflecting off its surface. His lips tightened into a thin line. The skepticism didn't waver, it solidified. He looked from the phone back to her dusty boots, her practical clothing, her sweat-sheened face, her undeniable blackness against the backdrop of emergent luxury. You really expect me to believe, he said slowly, his voice dropping to a near whisper laden with contempt, that a sister built all this. The word hung there, uglier than any slur. Sister. Stripped of warmth, of solidarity, weaponized into an expression of utter disbelief, of inherent incongruity. The idea that someone like her could conceive and command something like this was, in his eyes, ludicrous. Impossible. Before Avery could formulate a response, before the carefully constructed dam of her composure could fully break, O'Connor was out of the car. Ma'am, please step away from the structure. Keep your hands where we can see them. Are you serious? Avery cried, the absurdity crashing over her again, this time laced with panic. I just showed you. Call the number on the website. Call Marcus Thorne, my former partner. Call anyone, but Jenkins was already opening his door. The authoritative snap of the latch echoed in the twilight. You're trespassing on private property, ma'am, and causing a disturbance. I am the disturbance? Avery's voice cracked. On the site I am developing? This is insane. Her protests were futile. Years of learned caution warred with the raw injustice. She knew the script. Don't argue. Comply. Stay alive. But Malik's face flashed in her mind, his easy grin, the light in his eyes before it was extinguished. They see my hoodie, not my honor roll pin. You can't do this, she pleaded. But the words were lost as O'Connor efficiently, impersonally, guided her hands behind her back. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists. The click echoed the snap of the car door latch, a sound finalizing her humiliation. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the approaching wail of sirens, backup, summoned for a lone black woman standing on the ground she was literally building. The flashlight beam still pinned her, but now it illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, the raw concrete pillars casting long shadows, the intricate latticework that was supposed to be a symbol of heritage, now just bars framing her captivity. She was being arrested for existing in the space she had created, erased from her own narrative before the first coat of paint was even dry. The bitter taste in her mouth wasn't just dust anymore, it was the acrid flavor of history repeating itself right here, under the indifferent California sky. Flashback. Oakland, 2005. The porch swing creaked a lazy rhythm, a counterpoint to the insistent buzz of cicadas in the late afternoon heat. 15-year-old Avery sat hunched over a large sketch pad, charcoal smudging her fingers and the worn denim of her jeans. She wasn't drawing the familiar Victorian across the street with its peeling paint and overgrown bougainvillea. Instead, her pencil flew, conjuring neat rows of modern townhouses, clean lines, rooftop gardens, shared community spaces. Dreams rendered in graphite on cheap paper. Her grandmother, Mama Grace, sat beside her, shelling peas into a large enamel bowl, her movements slow and deliberate. Their block, once a vibrant tapestry of black families, backyard barbecues, and gospel music spilling from open windows, was fraying at the edges. For sale, signs sprouted like invasive weeds. Whispers of gentrification hung in the air, a polite word for displacement, for erasure. Each sold house felt like another stitch unraveling from the community quilt Mama Grace had helped weave over 50 years. The screen door slammed and Avery's older brother, Malik, vaulted over the porch railing, landing lightly on the grass. 17, lanky, with a quick, infectious grin and eyes that held both teenage mischief and a startling depth. He carried his backpack slung over one shoulder, a textbook peeking out. Another day, another interrogation, Malik announced, collapsing onto the top step. He pulled off his hoodie despite the heat, revealing a faded t-shirt and the small, glinting honor roll pin clipped to his collar. Officer Friendly stopped me down by the corner store. Asked what I was doing in the neighborhood. He snorted a sound devoid of humor. Been living here my whole life. Guess my melanin makes me look suspiciously out of place now. Avery looked up from her sketch pad, her brow furrowed. It was happening almost daily. The casual stops, the unwarranted questions, the assumption of guilt clinging to him like the summer humidity. Did you show him your ID? Yeah, Malik sighed, running a hand over his short-cropped hair. Showed him my school ID too. Didn't matter. He still looked at me like I was casing the joint. They see the hoodie, sis, not the honor roll pin. Never the pin. Mama Grace paused her shelling, her gaze distant. You be careful, Malik. Don't give them no reason. Her voice was quiet, heavy with a lifetime of navigating unseen tripwires. I don't give them a reason, Mama Grace, Malik said, frustration coloring his tone. Breathing while black seems to be reason enough these days. He picked up one of Avery's sketches. Building castles in the sky again, little sis? His usual teasing lacked its spark. Just thinking, Avery mumbled, flipping the page. Thinking about how we could build things for us, not just watch them push us out. Malik studied the drawing, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. Keep thinking, Avery. Someone's got a dream bigger than this block. Weeks later, the dream dissolved into a nightmare. Malik was walking home from the library, headphones on, lost in thought. A robbery had been reported nearby. The suspect description was vague. Young black male in a dark hoodie. Shots were fired. Mistaken identity, the official report called it. A tragic error. For Avery, it was the demolition of her world. The honor roll pin was found lying near his body, glinting under the streetlights. They saw the hoodie just like he said. Never the pin. His absence carved a hollow space in their family, in their community, a wound that gentrification's glossy facade could never conceal. The porch swing felt heavier, the silence louder. Avery kept sketching, but now the lines were sharper, fueled by a grief that had hardened into fierce determination. She wouldn't just dream bigger, she would build defiantly. Present day, the memory of Malik's easy grin, now forever frozen at 17, was a constant undercurrent beneath the relentless demands of Ubuntu developments. Her firm, named for the Nguni Bantu term embodying human interconnectedness, I am because we are, felt less like a business and more like a mission, a continuation of the fight Malik didn't get to finish. But the fight was proving harder, the obstacles more insidious than she had ever imagined as that 15-year-old sketching on the porch. Sabotage became the new normal. Crucial permits inexplicably went missing from city planning offices only to reappear weeks later after frantic searching and costly delays. Building materials were delivered damaged or late, citing logistical issues that never seemed to plague the other luxury developments cropping up like mushrooms after a rainstorm. Then came the online attacks. Yelp reviews for Crestview Luxe, a project still months from completion, began appearing, dripping with racist vitriol disguised as consumer feedback. Looks like a glorified housing project. Keep the ghetto out of Crestview. African motifs? Seriously? Who let the ghetto build a spa? Affirmative action architecture. Bet it falls down in a year. Avery read them with a sickening knot in her stomach. The casual cruelty, a digital echo of Officer Jenkins' sneering disbelief. Her white business partner, Marcus Thorne. A sharp-dressed finance guy she'd brought on for his connections and capital-raising prowess. Wrung his hands. Avery, we need to manage the optics, Marcus urged during a tense meeting in their sleek, minimalist office overlooking the construction site. He gestured towards a printout of the offending Yelp reviews. This kind of negativity, it spooks investors. It hurts pre-sales. Maybe we dial back some of the more ethnic motifs? The latticework, the lobby mural plans, just until we're established. Avery stared at him, the blood draining from her face. Dial it back. Compromise? Make it palatable. The same language, the same cowardly retreat disguised as pragmatism. Malik's face flashed again. They see the hoodie. Ethnic motifs? Avery repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Marcus, those motifs are a deliberate choice. They represent resilience, community history. They are part of the vision, not some optional accessory we can remove to appease racists. I'm not saying appease them. Marcus protested, shifting uncomfortably. I'm saying be strategic. We need this project to succeed. Think of the financial exposure. I am thinking of the financial exposure, Avery shot back, standing up, her chair scraping harshly against the polished concrete floor. I'm also thinking about why I started this company. It wasn't to build another soulless glass box that ignores the history of the state, the people who were pushed out to make way for places like Crestview. It was to build something with meaning, something that says we are here. If that scares off bigots, then maybe they aren't the buyers we want anyway. That's idealistic, Avery. This is business. No, Marcus, Avery said, her voice firm, devoid of heat now, just cold certainty. This is integrity. And I won't compromise it. Not for Yelp reviewers, not for nervous investors, not for you. She walked to the door. We're done here. Your partnership in Ubuntu Developments is terminated, effective immediately. I'll have legal draw up the dissolution papers. Marcus stared, aghast. You can't be serious. You need me. I needed your capital, Avery corrected him. I never needed your willingness to whitewash my vision. She left him sputtering in the glass-walled office, the view of her rising, defiant structure stretching out behind him. Firing Marcus felt like excising a tumor, painful, risky, but necessary for survival. Later that week, seeking refuge from the escalating pressures, Avery found herself drawn back to the Crestview Lux site, specifically to the areas designated for landscaping. Rafael Hernandez, the owner of a small, local landscaping company specializing in native California flora, was meticulously planting sages and monkeyflowers near the entrance plaza. Rafael, a Mexican-American man with kind eyes and earth permanently lodged under his fingernails, shared her commitment to authenticity and sustainability. He'd patiently explained to the skeptical and now defunct HOA planning committee why native species weren't weeds, but rather essential parts of the local ecosystem, beautiful in their resilience. Avery watched him work, his movements precise and caring. He was currently battling a stubborn patch of invasive English ivy that had snaked its way up an old retaining wall at the edge of the property, its dense green leaves choking out everything else. That stuff is relentless, Avery commented, crouching down beside him. Raphael looked up, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of dirt. He smiled, a genuine warmth that reached his eyes. See, like bad habits or other things. He tugged hard and a long runner of ivy came loose, revealing the pale, strangled stems of native grasses beneath. It looks strong, covers everything fast. But the roots are shallow. They don't belong here. They just take over, suffocate the things that have a right to be here, that understand the soil. Avery picked up a piece of the uprooted ivy, feeling its waxy leaves, its tenacious grip. Systemic racism's deep roots, she thought. Invasive, choking, needing to be torn out to let the authentic, the resilient, breathe. Let me help, she said, rolling up her sleeves. Side by side, they worked in comfortable silence for a while, pulling and digging, untangling the invasive vines from the earth. The shared physical effort, the focus on nurturing the native and removing the harmful, forged a connection deeper than words. Raphael spoke softly about his grandmother's garden in Oaxaca, the herbs she grew for healing, the stories embedded in the soil. Avery found herself telling him about Malik, about the porch swing sketches, about the constant fight to be seen, not just as a black woman, but as a creator, a builder. In the shared work of uprooting the ivy, in the quiet understanding that passed between them, Avery felt a flicker of the Ubuntu she'd named her company after. A sense of shared humanity, of finding strength in connection, even as the forces arrayed against her gathered strength. The blueprint for the building was fixed, but the blueprint for navigating the world outside its walls was constantly being redrawn, tested, and defended. Crestview City Hall was a monument to carefully curated history. Built in the 1920s, its Spanish Revival architecture, stucco walls the color of bleached bone, red tile roof, wrought iron grills over arched windows spoke of a romanticized colonial past, conveniently glossing over the less picturesque realities of conquest and exclusion. Inside, the council chambers echoed this aesthetic. Heavy dark wood, portraits of stern-faced founding fathers, all white, all male, and an American flag standing stiffly beside a California bear flag. The air conditioning hummed aggressively, keeping the room chilled, sterile, despite the simmering tensions. Avery stood at the podium, adjusting the microphone. Her voice, usually resonant with the confidence of someone used to commanding construction sites, felt small in the cavernous room. She was here not for her own project today, but for Sip and Soul, the last remaining black-owned business on Crestview's main thoroughfare. It was a cozy cafe, a gathering place that served strong coffee, sweet potato pie, and a sense of belonging that was rapidly becoming extinct in the increasingly homogenized, upscale landscape of the town. A new boutique hotel development was planned for the block, and Sip and Soul, owned by the elderly Mrs. Dubois for 40 years, was deemed an obstacle to progress. Council members, Avery began, her gaze sweeping across the 5 impassive faces on the dais. I'm here tonight to urge you to reconsider the eviction notice served to Sip and Soul Cafe. This isn't just about one small business. It's about the soul of Crestview. Mrs. Dubois Cafe is a living piece of this community's history, a space that fosters connection and diversity in a town that is, frankly, becoming less diverse by the day. She spoke of the cafe's role as an informal community center, a place where elders shared stories, where young people found encouragement, where the shrinking Black population of Crestview could gather without feeling like outsiders. She presented letters of support, historical photos, even an economic impact study showing the cafe's contribution to local employment and foot traffic. When she finished, a polite, strained silence filled the room. Then Councilwoman Beatrice Higgins leaned into her microphone. Higgins was the archetype of Crestview privilege, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, impeccable linen suit, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was known for her sharp tongue and her unwavering commitment to Crestview's upscale image. "Thank you for your passionate, appeal, Ms. Carter," Higgins said, her tone dripping with condescension. "We all appreciate history, but Crestview must look forward. This new hotel development represents significant investment, increased property values, and jobs." She paused, fixing Avery with a cool stare. "Progress, unfortunately, sometimes requires sacrifice. We cannot let nostalgia impede the necessary evolution of our city." Sacrifice? The word landed like a blow. Whose sacrifice? Always the same people sacrificed on the altar of someone else's definition of progress. Mrs. Du Bois' legacy. Malik's future. Communities bulldozed for freeways or luxury condos. Avery gripped the sides of the podium, her knuckles white. "Sacrifice," she challenged, her voice rising again, the carefully controlled modulation slipping. "Councilwoman, are you suggesting that Mrs. Du Bois, who poured her life savings and 40 years into that cafe, who employed local residents when nobody else would, whose business is part of the vibrant fabric you claim to cherish, that her livelihood is the acceptable price for another generic hotel catering to tourists who likely know nothing of this town's real history?" "Now, Miss Carter," the mayor intervened placatingly, "let's maintain decorum." But Avery couldn't stop. The injustice was too raw, too familiar. Decorum? Is it decorous to systematically dismantle every shred of Black history and presence in this town? First, you price people out of their homes with skyrocketing property taxes driven by developments like mine, a fact I grapple with daily, and now you actively push out the businesses that remain? Where does it end? When Crestview is nothing but beige boutiques and chain restaurants, completely sanitized of any inconvenient history or color. "Ms. Carter, you are out of order." Higgins snapped, banging her gavel lightly. "No, this is out of order." Avery gestured around the room, at the portraits, at the council members. "This entire process is designed to silence dissent, to prioritize profit over people, to maintain a status quo built on exclusion. You talk about progress, but all I see is erasure." Two police officers, stationed discreetly at the back, began moving forward. Avery saw them coming, the same calculated neutrality in their expressions she'd seen on Jenkins and O'Connor. Her breath hitched. "Not again. You need to step away from the podium, ma'am," one officer said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not finished." Avery protested, but her voice was trembling now, fueled by righteous anger and the sickeningly familiar feeling of being forcibly silenced. "Ms. Carter, if you do not leave the podium, we will have to escort you out," Higgins declared, her voice ringing with authority. Avery stood her ground for a moment longer, her heart pounding against her ribs. She looked at Mrs. Du Bois, sitting in the front row, her face etched with worry and resignation. She looked at the impassive council members. She thought of Malik. Then hands gripped her arms. The scene devolved quickly. Avery instinctively pulled back, a cry of frustration escaping her. The resistance, however slight, was all the justification the officers needed. They tightened their grip, pulling her away from the podium, towards the exit. She didn't fight physically, but her voice rang out. "You can't just erase us. We belong here." Someone in the audience was filming with their phone. Avery glimpsed the red recording light. The lens pointed directly at her as she was half-dragged, half-escorted through the heavy chamber doors, her face flushed, tears of fury stinging her eyes. The TikTok video went viral within hours. Edited maliciously, it showed only the climax, Avery yelling, resisting the officers, though she hadn't, being removed from the chambers. The caption read, "Angry Black Woman Disrupts Democracy in Crestview. Hashtag Karen Council, hashtag Untitled." The comments section became a cesspool. Typical. Always playing the victim. She's probably mad they wouldn't give her project special treatment. Who does she think she is? Go back where you came from. Someone needs to tear down that ghetto Starbucks she was crying about. Bad for property values. Referring to Sip and Soul. See? This is why we need order. She was clearly hysterical. The narrative was swift, brutal, and utterly divorced from context. Avery, the successful developer fighting for community preservation, was instantly recast as the stereotypical angry black woman, irrational and disruptive. The irony was corrosive. She, who navigated bias daily with gritted teeth and forced smiles, was now Exhibit A for the very prejudice she fought against. That night, exhaustion weighing on her like wet cement, Avery drove home to the modest rental house she kept near the Crestview site. As her headlights swept across the driveway, they illuminated something stark white against the dark gray paint of her Tesla, a word spray-painted in large, jagged letters, Colonizer. The breath left her body in a whoosh. Colonizer. The accusation was so twisted, so profoundly ignorant, it was almost dizzying. Her, building on land whose original inhabitants were long displaced, whose recent black history was being actively erased, she was the colonizer? Because she dared to build something ambitious, something beautiful, something black-led in a white space? Because she fought for inclusion? The absurdity was a physical blow. She stood frozen for a moment, the beams of her headlights illuminating the hateful word. Then, a familiar rage, cold and deep, settled in. She wouldn't let them win. Not like this. She went to the garage, found rags and solvent, and began scrubbing, her movements fierce, almost violent. The paint resisted, smearing before slowly yielding to the chemicals and her determined effort. A pair of headlights turned into her driveway. Raphael climbed out of his truck, his expression concerned. He must have seen the viral video, heard the news. He stopped short when he saw the word on her car, then looked at her furiously scrubbing in the dim light. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply asked, his voice quiet, why hide it? Avery paused, rag in hand, the acrid smell of solvent stinging her nostrils. What? The paint, he said, gesturing to the smeared white letters. They put it there to shame you, to silence you. Why erase it? Why not reclaim it? Avery looked at the ugly word, then at Raphael's earnest face. Reclaim it? How? An idea sparked, audacious and defiant. You still have those paints? She asked, thinking of the vibrant, eco-friendly paints he sometimes used for decorative elements in his landscape designs. The ones you used for the community garden mural in Santa Ana? Raphael nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Together, under the glow of the porch light and the halogen work lamp Raphael retrieved from his truck, they didn't just cover the slur. They transformed the entire car. Using stencils Avery quickly sketched based on Acadinkra symbols, Sankofa, learned from the past, Gai Nyam, supremacy of God / the creator, and Konsan, chain link, symbolizing unity and community, they repainted the Tesla. They turned the vehicle, a symbol of Silicon Valley aspiration often targeted with resentment, into a rolling testament to heritage, resilience, and artistic defiance. They worked late into the night, the shared act of creation a bomb against the ugliness they were covering. By dawn, the car was no longer just a gray electric vehicle. It was a canvas adorned with powerful symbols in bold earth tones and vibrant blues, the hateful white letters obliterated beneath layers of meaning and beauty. It was no longer a target, it was a declaration. Driving it wouldn't be hiding, it would be announcing her presence, refusing to be defined by their hate. It was, in its own small way, building louder. The email arrived like a digital depth charge, anonymous and explosive. Subject line, Crestview's Crimson Secret. Attached was a scanned document, brittle and yellowed with age, a copy of the original 1938 property covenants for the Crestview Estates subdivision, the precursor to the modern town. The language was stark, unambiguous, couched in dry legalese that couldn't mask its venomous intent. No part of said property shall ever be used or occupied by, or sold, conveyed, leased, rented, or given to any person of Negro, Japanese, Chinese, or Mexican blood or descent, or any person whose blood is not entirely that of the Caucasian race. Below the typed restrictions were the signatures of the original developers and landowners. Among them, stark and undeniable, was the flourishing signature of Thaddeus Higgins Sr., Councilwoman Beatrice Higgins' great-grandfather. The anonymous sender, claiming to be a disillusioned former employee of the city archives, had sent the document not just to Avery but to several local journalists and activist groups. Within hours, the story detonated online. #Crimson Covenants began trending on Twitter, fueled by outrage and the sickening realization that the town's manicured lawns and serene streets were built upon a foundation of explicit, legally sanctioned racism. The mayor, whose own family name appeared on adjacent land deeds from the same era, issued a stammering, evasive statement about unfortunate historical contexts that satisfied no one. Avery's inbox, already a battleground after the council meeting fiasco, became a deluge. The messages were a jarring mix of poison and solidarity. See? Higgins was right about progress. Keeping you people out was progress. Know your place, affirmative action higher. Go back to Africa, Bilderbitch. Crestview was fine before you showed up. Hope someone burns down your ghetto palace. Hashtag Crimson Covenants did it right. Mixed amongst the bile were messages of support, often tinged with the weariness of long-fought battles. One email stood out, typed in the slightly shaky, all-caps style of someone unfamiliar with computers. Dear Ms. Carter, I am Leroy Johnson, 94 years old. I read about you in that town. I fought in Italy in World War II. Part of the 92nd Infantry, the Buffalo Soldiers. We liberated towns over there full of people who looked like US back home couldn't even drink from the same fountain, let alone live where we pleased. My squad died freeing towns we couldn't have lived in back in California because of rules like that Crestview one. It makes my blood boil even now. Don't let them shut you up. Don't let them erase what people like me fought for even when this country didn't fight for US. Build louder, young lady. Build so loud they can't pretend they don't hear US. Yours in the struggle, SGT. Leroy Johnson, Ret. Avery printed Leroy Johnson's email, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. She taped it above her desk next to the photo of Malik. Build louder. It became her mantra, a shield against the onslaught. But the fallout from hashtag Crimson Covenants had immediate, devastating consequences beyond online vitriol. The heightened scrutiny on Crestview, the sudden focus on its history of exclusion, seemed to trigger a reactionary wave. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, activity in the region, always a background hum of anxiety for communities like Raphael's, escalated sharply. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning. 2 black SUVs pulled up outside Sip and Soul. Agents swarmed the small cafe during the morning rush, demanding papers, creating chaos and terror. Mrs. Du Bois, frail but defiant, tried to intervene, but she was brushed aside. Several employees, including Raphael's cousin Hector, who worked as a barista, were detained. Raphael called Avery, his voice tight with panic and fury. They took Hector, Avery, and Maria from the kitchen. They just grabbed them. In front of everyone, Avery felt a cold dread seep into her. This wasn't random. It felt targeted, punitive. A message sent not just to the immigrant community, but to those who dared challenge Crestview's curated image. Raphael's own situation became instantly precarious. He'd been navigating the labyrinthine green card renewal process for months, his application caught in bureaucratic limbo. His current work authorization was set to expire in 2 weeks. The raid at Sip and Soul, a place he frequented, a place connected to Avery's recent public fight, made him a visible target. Going to the cafe, visiting the site, even driving his work truck with its distinctive native plant logo now felt dangerous. You need to lay low, Raph, Avery urged, her mind racing. Stay away from the site for a few days. Let me see what I can do. Lay low where? Raphael asked, the despair clear in his voice. My whole life is here. My business. My crew depends on me. The legal fees for Hector and the others were astronomical. Community fundraising efforts began immediately, but it wasn't enough. Raphael, trying to help his cousin while managing his own precarious status, was stretched thin, his anxiety palpable every time they spoke. Avery knew what she had to do. Malik's life insurance payout, untouched for years, sat in a savings account earmarked for a future Avery hadn't yet defined. Maybe a scholarship fund. Maybe seed money for truly affordable housing. It was blood money, in a way, the state's meager compensation for a stolen life. She'd never been able to bring herself to spend it. She called her mother, Mama Grace's successor, as the family's quiet anchor, her voice thick with unshed tears as she explained her decision. That money, Avery, that was for Malik's future. Her mother whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The future they took from him. I know, Mom, Avery said, tears finally tracing paths through the dust on her own cheeks. But Malik would understand. He knew what it was like to be targeted, to be seen as disposable. He wouldn't want me to stand by while someone else's family is torn apart, while someone like Raphael, who's trying to build something good, is threatened. This fight, it's the same fight, Mom. Just different faces, different tactics. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Using his money to fight for justice, for someone else's chance. I think he'd want this. It's like letting his legacy do the work he couldn't. There was a long silence on the line, broken only by her mother's soft weeping. Then, all right, baby girl. You do what you have to do. Make him proud. The next day, Avery transferred the entire amount Malik's college fund, his stolen future translated into dollars and cents, to the immigration lawyer representing Hector, Maria, and now Raphael, whose expired green card suddenly made him vulnerable to deportation. It felt like tearing out a piece of her own heart, but also like planting something vital in poisoned soil. It was a sacrifice, yes, but one made willingly, defiantly, in the face of a system designed to break them. It was another brick laid in the foundation of resistance, paid for with a currency of grief and love. Build louder, Leroy Johnson had said. Sometimes, building louder meant tearing down your own carefully constructed walls to protect someone else. Opening night wasn't the champagne and canapes affair the glossy brochures promised. Instead of smooth jazz and polite murmurs of admiration, the air outside Crestview Lux crackled with tension, thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the rhythmic chants of protesters. A large contingent, organized under the banner of Black Lives Matter and local anti-gentrification groups, had gathered at the gleaming entrance, their signs stark against the twilight sky. Crestview built on blood, not luxury. No justice, no peace. No condo fees. Housing is a right, not a commodity. Police in riot gear formed a perimeter, their plastic shields reflecting the flashing blue and red lights of their vehicles. The scene was a volatile tableau, the stark, modern lines of Avery's building, a symbol of contested progress, caught between the raw anger of the displaced and the imposing force of the state. Avery stood inside the main lobby, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the confrontation. Her stomach churned. This wasn't the opening she'd envisioned, dreamed of since those porch swing sketches. She'd wanted dialogue, community engagement, a model for development that acknowledged history, even tried, in its small way, to redress it through local hiring, sustainable practices, and the inclusion of affordable units mandated by a hard-won negotiation with the city. But the hashtag Crimson Covenants leak, the IC raids, the viral video of her ejection from the council meeting, it had all coalesced into a perfect storm of outrage directed squarely at her creation. Her building had become a lightning rod, attracting the fury meant for the entire system. Raphael stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. His own legal battle was ongoing, a constant source of anxiety, but he wouldn't stay away tonight. They have a right to be angry, Avery, he said quietly, his gaze fixed on the protesters. This place, it represents something unattainable, even offensive to people pushed out, ignored. I know, Avery whispered, but I hoped this could be different. A starting point, maybe. She felt torn, understanding the protesters' rage while simultaneously defending the vision she'd poured her life into. Was it possible to build something beautiful on poisoned ground without becoming part of the poison yourself? Outside, the chanting grew louder. Scuffles broke out along the police line. A rock sailed through the air, clanging harmlessly off a riot shield. The police advanced, batons raised. Avery watched, horrified as the scene threatened to escalate. Then she noticed a familiar figure directing traffic at the edge of the chaos away from the main confrontation. It was Officer Jenkins, demoted, apparently, from patrol car duty to managing the flow of cars diverted from the protest zone. He looked older, wearier, the crispness gone from his uniform, replaced by a reflective vest. Impulsively, Avery slipped out a side door, away from the main entrance. She walked towards the intersection where Jenkins stood, his back to her. The sounds of the protest were slightly muffled here, replaced by the idling engines of frustrated drivers. Officer Jenkins, she called out. He turned, startled. Recognition dawned slowly on his face, followed by a flicker of something unreadable. Embarrassment? Regret? He avoided her eyes. Ms. Carter. His voice was flat, stripped of its earlier authority. The air hung thick with unspoken words, the memory of their first encounter, the flashlight, the cuffs, the sneering disbelief. You expect me to believe a sister built this? Things have changed, Avery said quietly, gesturing vaguely towards the gleaming condo building behind her, then towards the protest unfolding down the street. Jenkins finally met her gaze. His own was clouded. Yeah, he mumbled. Lots changed. He looked towards the flashing lights, the angry signs. Didn't know, didn't realize, he trailed off, seeming genuinely at a loss. Avery reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn photograph she always carried, a picture of Malik, grinning, holding his high school diploma, the honor roll pin visible on his graduation gown. She held it out to Jenkins. His name was Malik, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. He was my brother. 17. Honor student. Killed by police. Mistaken identity. Jenkins stared at the photograph, his face paling slightly beneath his weathered tan. He looked from the smiling young man in the picture back to Avery, the developer he'd arrested on her own property. The connection, the human cost behind the abstract statistics and vague suspect descriptions seemed to land with visible force. He swallowed hard. I didn't know, he stammered, the words inadequate, clumsy. Now you do? Avery said softly, taking the photo back, her heart aching with the familiar grief. She turned and walked back towards the lobby, leaving Jenkins standing alone at the intersection, the ghost of her brother hanging between them. It wasn't absolution, not forgiveness, but perhaps a crack in the wall of his certainty. She had just stepped back inside the lobby when a sudden explosion of glass shattered the night. A Molotov cocktail, hurled from the edge of the crowd, crashed through the window of the ground floor sales office, erupting in a whoosh of orange flame. Chaos erupted. People screamed. The protesters surged forward, the police line buckled. Flames leaped up the temporary walls of the sales office, greedily consuming brochures, floor plans, furniture. Avery's heart leaped into her throat. The sales office, that's where she'd stored the original hand-drawn blueprints, the archival copies, too precious to leave at her own office. And adjacent to it, just outside, was the small medicinal herb garden Raphael had planted near the entrance, a patch of native healing plants, a quiet homage to his grandmother, a space meant to offer balm and connection. The blueprints? Avery gasped, moving towards the fire. Avery, no. Raphael grabbed her arm, pulling her back. It's too dangerous, but the sight of the flames devouring years of work, devouring the tangible proof of her vision, ignited a desperate instinct. Smoke poured from the shattered window, thick and black. Security alarms blared, adding to the cacophony of sirens now converging on the scene. She could see the flat file drawers where the blueprints were kept, flames licking perilously close. She saw Raphael's carefully tended herbs wilting, scorching in the intense heat radiating through the broken window. Ignoring Raphael's shouts, Avery grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, wrenched open the sales office door, unlocked for the opening event, and plunged into the smoke-filled room. The heat was intense, stinging her eyes, stealing her breath. She aimed the extinguisher at the base of the flames engulfing a display stand, the chemical foam hissing as it hit the fire. She fought her way towards the file drawers, coughing, her eyes streaming. The fire was spreading too fast. She managed to yank open one drawer. It contained renderings, marketing materials, all replaceable. She tried another. Locked. The key? Where was the key? Panic seized her. Flames licked at the ceiling tiles above. The roar of the fire was deafening. Raphael appeared at the doorway, his face grim, pulling her back forcefully. Avery! Now! We have to get out. Defeated, choking, she let him pull her from the inferno just as a section of the ceiling collapsed where she'd been standing. They stumbled back into the lobby, gasping for air, the smell of smoke clinging to their clothes, their hair. The sales office was engulfed. The original blueprints, the tangible link to her earliest vision, were gone. Outside, the fire spread, consuming the small garden, turning Raphael's carefully cultivated symbols of healing and resilience into ash. Sirens wailed, closer now. Firefighters swarmed the scene, hoses unleashing powerful streams of water. The protest dissolved into chaos and dispersal, the original message lost in the violence of the flames. Through the smoke and flashing lights, Avery's gaze fell on the debris near the shattered window. Amidst the broken glass and charred wood lay a single brick dislodged from a decorative planter box near the entrance. It was scorched, blackened, but intact. Pushing past a paramedic trying to check her for smoke inhalation, Avery walked numbly towards the debris. She bent down and picked up the brick. It was heavy, solid, still warm from the fire. She clutched it tightly, its rough surface grounding her amidst the swirling chaos. The blueprints were gone, the garden ash, the opening night a disaster. But this brick remained. A piece of the foundation. Scarred, fire-tested, but enduring. It was a burden, heavy with loss and the violence of the night. But it was also a legacy, a tangible piece of the struggle, something real she could hold onto. She wouldn't let the fire be the end of the story. It would be part of the foundation. 1 year later, the Crestview Lux condominiums stood against the California sky, not as gleaming symbols of finished luxury, but as a stark, skeletal monument to interrupted ambition. Construction had halted indefinitely after the fire, bogged down by insurance investigations, funding withdrawals, and the toxic miasma of controversy that clung to the project like stubborn ivy. The half-finished structures, exposed steel beams rusting slightly in the sea air, concrete floors bare, had become an involuntary canvas. Graffiti artists, reclaiming the space in their own way, had covered the lower levels with vibrant, defiant murals. One piece stood out, sprawling across a wide concrete wall. Black Girl Magic built this, surrounded by intricate patterns echoing Avery's original Akan-inspired designs. It was both an homage and a reclamation. Avery Carter stood before a congressional subcommittee on housing discrimination and systemic racism, not in her developer's hard hat but in a simple, sharp suit. The lights were bright, the microphones imposing, the faces of the representatives a mixture of sympathy, skepticism, and practiced neutrality. In her hand, she held the fire-scorched brick salvaged from the opening night disaster. Esteemed members of the committee, she began, her voice clear and steady, echoing slightly in the formal chamber. I am Avery Carter, founder of Ubuntu Developments. A year ago, I stood amidst the wreckage of my burning project, a project meant to be a testament to inclusive vision, holding this brick. She raised it slightly, letting them see its blackened, scarred surface. This brick, she continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, represents many things. It represents the physical structure I tried to build in Crestview Heights. It represents the fiery backlash faced by those who dare to challenge exclusionary spaces. It represents the legacy of my brother, Malik, murdered years ago because of the color of his skin and the hoodie he wore, a tragedy rooted in the same systemic biases that label a black developer suspicious on her own property. That dismiss her vision as ethnic, that try to erase black history from communities like Crestview. She spoke for nearly an hour, weaving her personal story with data on housing discrimination, gentrification, racial covenants like Crestview's #Crimson Covenants, and the disproportionate policing of communities of color. She didn't just talk about buildings, she talked about the people displaced, the histories buried, the dreams deferred or destroyed. She held up Malik's photo. She showed them Leroy Johnson's email. She talked about Raphael's struggle, the weaponization of immigration enforcement, the fear that choked communities. You erase us from the planning documents, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction, holding the brick aloft again. You erase us from the history books. You try to erase us from the neighborhoods our families built. But we are the mortar. We are the foundations upon which much of this nation's prosperity was constructed, often without credit, without compensation, without basic human dignity. This brick is heavy, carries the weight of that history, but it is also solid. It endures, and we will continue to build, brick by brick, until the structures of inequality crumble. Her testimony, raw and powerfully delivered, resonated far beyond the committee room. It sparked debate, fueled advocacy efforts, and put a human face on the dry statistics of systemic injustice. Back in California, the fallout from the Crestview fire and the #Crimson Covenant scandal continued to ripple. Councilwoman Higgins, facing intense public pressure and undeniable proof of her family's role in establishing the town's racist foundations, narrowly survived a recall election, her political future permanently tarnished. But the scandal unearthed something unexpected within her own family. Her daughter, Emily Higgins, a recent architectural graduate working at a prestigious firm in San Francisco, had been horrified by the revelations. Digging into her family history beyond the sanitized narratives she'd grown up with, Emily discovered not only the racial covenants signed by her great-grandfather but also evidence linking an earlier ancestor to a documented lynching in the county's rural past. The discovery shattered her worldview. A few months after Avery's testimony, Emily reached out. She met Avery at Sip and Soul, which had narrowly survived eviction thanks to a surge of community support and legal aid following the council meeting debacle. Mrs. Du Bois still presided behind the counter, her gaze sharp but welcoming. Emily, earnest and visibly wrestling with her family's legacy, laid her portfolio on the small table. Miss Carter. Avery, she began hesitantly. What my family, what my ancestors did, it's abhorrent. The covenants, the violence. Crestview's prosperity was built on that exclusion. I can't ignore it. I work as an architect, designing spaces, and I realize now how much power we have, how much responsibility. She took a deep breath. Your testimony, it was incredible. What you're trying to do. I want to help. I need to help rebuild what my family helped break. She pushed her portfolio forward. I know I have a lot to learn, but I want to offer my skills, my time, whatever I can to your work. If you'll have me. Avery studied the young woman, saw the genuine remorse and determination in her eyes. It wasn't about charity, it felt like accountability taking root. Healing, Avery knew, required acknowledging the wounds, especially when your own ancestors inflicted them. Okay, Emily, Avery said slowly, a cautious hope flickering within her. Let's talk about what rebuilding really looks like. The Crestview Lux project remained in limbo, a monument to unfinished business. But Avery, with renewed purpose and unexpected allies, wasn't waiting. Ubuntu Developments shifted focus. The insurance payout from the fire, combined with new impact investments secured after her testimony, provided the seed capital for a different kind of project. Not luxury condos, but a mixed-income cooperative housing development on a piece of neglected land straddling the border between Crestview and a neighboring, less affluent town. It was designed with community spaces, rooftop gardens, childcare facilities, and units reserved for low and moderate-income families, with priority given to those with historical ties to the area or those displaced by gentrification. Raphael, his immigration status finally secured after a grueling legal fight funded by Malik's legacy, designed the landscaping, a vibrant tapestry of native plants, medicinal herbs, and community vegetable plots. The groundbreaking ceremony was modest. Nothing like the planned gala for Crestview Lux. No riot police, no protesters clashing. Just a diverse group of future residents, community leaders, volunteers, and supporters gathered on a patch of dusty ground under a hopeful blue sky. Avery stood beside Raphael, shovel in hand. Emily Higgins was there, holding blueprints, talking animatedly with future residents. Mrs. Du Bois beamed from a folding chair, a plate of her famous sweet potato pie in her lap. Leroy Johnson, frail but resolute in his VFW cap, sat beside her. Then Avery saw them arrive, Officer Jenkins, looking awkward but determined, holding the hand of his wife, a kind-faced woman Avery recognized as a nurse from the local clinic. Jenkins had reached out after Avery's testimony, shared his own story, a working-class guy struggling with Crestview's rising costs, his wife, a Haitian immigrant, facing her own subtle forms of discrimination. He'd started volunteering at a community center, attending meetings, listening. He wasn't magically transformed, but he was trying. He and his wife were among the first applicants for the new co-op housing, seeking not luxury, but community, affordability, a place to belong. They walked over and shook Avery's hand. The first shovel broke the earth. Then another and another. A collective effort, turning soil, laying a new foundation. As the symbolic groundbreaking concluded and the roar of the first bulldozer signaled the real work beginning, Avery looked towards the hazy outline of the unfinished Crestview Lux towers in the distance. She felt a presence beside her, the familiar, comforting weight of Malik's memory. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, the sounds of construction, this time hopeful construction, filling the air. She held the scorched brick in her mind, felt its weight, its history, its promise. She whispered, unheard by anyone but the ghost of her brother, "They'll see us now."